Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to share this with you. I do want to say that Citizens for Conservation has been working on this project for probably a good 12 to 14 months. And we acquired this property back in September of last year. But we've been working on acquisition for a very long time. It has been a process, and we were very fortunate to keep this quiet until we acquired it, which was a proud moment for Citizens for Conservation, that we didn't let it leak out that this was out there on the market and or being considered for acquisition. But we are very, very happy that we were the organization that was able to acquire this property. And so with that, I'm going to begin to talk about what we are calling the Hill and Dale Preserve. And I'm really talking about what the Citizens for Conservation is doing in the preparation for a restoration plan. We have a lot of work to do to get there. And so I'm just going to sort of walk you through the process that we're going to be looking at, how we assemble information, how we get stuff ready for us to make decisions about what we want to do on this 245-acre parcel. So with that, I'm sort of going to walk through the process tonight, and the things that we're going to be doing is sort of setting the tone and looking at the project needs. We're going to collect a lot of preserved characteristics. We're going to do something that's really, really critical for any restoration project, and that's model the hydrology and the surrounding landscape. We're going to develop a restoration concept. We're going to develop a management plan, which is the next phase after the restoration. So once we do the initial restoration, we need a management plan. We do need to take this to get approval from our board. And so that's a significant step that we would like to take, hopefully later on this year. Late summer, early fall is our plan. And then we, as you know, have to get a permit and design the concept. We're also working on obtaining funding for the restoration. We're also making a serious consideration of phasing the restoration concept, because we are dealing with 245 acres. This is one of the larger properties that Citizens for Conservation now owns. The other aspect that is really critical for our organization is to keep in mind how we engage volunteers and coordinate them and have them help with the project, and actually doing a significant amount of some of the work on the site. Some is going to have to be done by a contractor, but there's a lot of work that we are envisioning could be done and will be done by volunteers. And then we'll get into implementing the plan. That may take from 3 to 5 years to get the initial restoration done, and then monitoring and adaptive management will come in after that. And adaptive management is looking at what's out there and monitoring things and finding out what's happening. And if things aren't working, then we would change our management techniques to try to get what we're looking for. So with that, this is not a parcel that has not been on the radar for us. It has, and it's been identified through the Spring Creek Watershed Plan. This was initially done in 2012. These plans are done with the Illinois EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And as you can see, we recently submitted an update in 2022, but this plan is certainly an interesting effort to highlight what's in the watershed and what is the priorities for all the partners of the watershed. So this was prepared by Applied Ecological Services, which has now been purchased by RES, which is another ecological organization, and they have been working on this. So if you can see, and I'm going to try to wiggle my cursor around, you can sort of see the property here in the southeast corner of McHenry County. And when we were doing the watershed plan, this parcel was identified as a high priority for open space protection. Now, that doesn't mean that we had to do it, or McHenry County Conservation District had to do it. Someone could have done it and put a conservation easement on. Many ways to protect these parcels, and you can see that we're part of a very unique corridor here to the south in Cook County, and it's Spring Creek Forest Preserve, and that's a very large preserve on the Spring Creek watershed. So not all these things in red are protected, but this is a recommendation again of all the partners that were involved in the watershed planning process. They also looked at critical project areas. Where should we be working at? And the Hill and Dale property here was identified for drained wetlands. And as we move on through tonight, you will see that this site does have excellent potential for restoring wetlands. And then it's also been a critical area for wetland restoration, as you can see this brown color here in the parcel. And so these are some of the factors that we're using that identified this parcel when we went to acquire it. And it was information that we used with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation to get a grant, not only to acquire the parcel, but also to begin our restoration planning efforts. So in total, the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation granted us $4.9 million, which is a significant portion of the $10 million that Citizens for Conservation raised during a capital fundraising project for this Hill and Dale parcel. It's also really important for looking at our groundwater recharge areas. And this was something that BACOG had done, the Barrington Area Council of Governments. They had done a groundwater project. And so as you can see, the darker purple brown color is indicating that they're highly sensitive recharge areas. And so protecting this parcel is also part of the thinking about our daily drinking water and the health of our water. So I'm going to start getting into how we plan for restoration. You know, we've identified that it's an important parcel through the plan. We've also looked at the site, and I'm going to show you some things that are what we think about as planners and ecologists and landowners when we're trying to think about what we want to have this site look like. And so the first thing we really want to do is I'm sorry, stop moving the mouse around, identifying the historical setting. So one of the things that we look at is the geology. Another one is topography. We also look at the soil. And then, you know, the aerial photos give us a really good indication of land use. So I find that the United States Geological Survey quad maps, we call them quadrangles, and this is the one for Barrington. And you might not be able to quite see it here, but in my cursor here is the racetrack that's part of the Hill and Dale Preserve. And so the boundary kind of comes down like this, and then up along Ridge Road, and then up. And through the center of the property, here goes Spring Creek. And so these different colors are indicating different kind of geological landforms. And, you know, we go back to when we were thinking about naming this parcel, you know, it was called the Hill and Dale Farm, but it's also, it's really interesting, as you can see, these little brown squiggly lines that are going up the hillside here. That is indicating topography going up. And then on the other side, it also goes up. So those are the hills. And then the bottom here where the creek is and the floodplain, that's called the dale. So each one of these formations that are here, or different things, indicate to us what could have been on the land. You know, we have things that are subglacial till, we have outwash, we have lake deposits, we have Grays Lake peat, which is an organic deposit, and that accumulates in low-lying areas. And then, you know, the Cahokia formation is alluvial, which means things that come out with the stream along the stream corridor. So there's a lot of deposits here that are laid down by the stream on top of the original geology. So it's really interesting to look at this. You can see that there's you know, a lot of wetland areas on here. that are especially in this purple zone and then along the stream. So we also look at topography, and I divided the site up a little bit north-south here, just to be able to have you see that again, on the west side over here, you can see the land going up to Ridgetop Lane. It's a kind of a neat name for a road on top of a ridge. And then on this other side, the topography goes up. So this topography lets us know, what's going on in the landscape. We know that water that hits on top of the hill is either going to run down the surface of the hill, or it may infiltrate and run down and then resurface down by the stream. I also want to have you notice on this map these wet areas up here. These are what we call former wetland scars or wetland areas. And I'm going to ask you to keep that in mind as we move along, because those things are indicative of where wetlands used to be, and you'll see them pop up. I also want to look at the south end and show you some things here. And then I'm going to ask you to pay attention to this little mountaintop in the topography line. I'm going to zoom in on this. This is about 10-foot topo lines. When you're on the ArcGIS, if you zoom in, it goes down to 1. And when we do that, here's that little mountaintop again. But there's something really indicative here. You see all these kind of topography lines coming to a point. This one's coming to a point. This one's coming to a point. This one's coming to a point. And that kind of means that the water is draining across this site. And in this particular case, this is the east side and this is the west side. And so I'm sorry. Yes, west. I'm sorry. I'm directionally challenged all the time. So it indicates by these things pointing to the direction of where the water is coming from. So when we look at the map and the topography, we can get that kind of information from the map. We also look at the soils, and here is the soil survey done by the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And you can see here, there's a number of different soils identified. And these soils were actually identified by a contractor who we paid to go out and actually sample all the soils out there. And I'm going to show you in a minute what they came up with compared to what you see now. But you can see a lot of things are laying in the same direction as the geology and the same direction as the stream. So now you can't really see the colors on the right-hand side, but this is what our contractor came up with. And you can see that there's a significant difference between what was on the original survey, which it identified 8 soil types, and then this one identified 15 different soil types. And so it's very interesting. The one on the left, the original thing, was done at a scale of 1 to 20,000 feet. Each one of these little dots that you see on this map on the right is actually something that they took a soil boring and identified the soils. So this gives us a better understanding of which soils are where and what kind of plant community might be growing on top of them. And then they also looked at what we are really interested in is hydric soils. And so what you're seeing on the left is the Natural Resource Conservation Service mapping, and what you see on the left is what on the right, excuse me, is what our contractor came up with. So we have a significant amount of hydric soils incorporated along the Spring Creek that flows through here. You can see on the right side that there's not a lot, but that's a lot of higher ground, and that's likely where we'll see savanna. But you can also see this thin strip of soil right here, and this soil has been identified as a really porous soil. And my thinking and other people's thinking is that where water would be coming up from groundwater and coming to the surface and as a seep or a fen. So it's really interesting information that can help drive where we're going. And we're also looking at wetlands. And so on the left, my left-hand side is, whoops, I'm sorry. Let's see if I can go back. Well, it just, I'm sorry. Let me see. Here we go. So there's NRCS wetlands on the left side of the screen, and on the right side is what we call AIDed or advanced identified wetlands. These are wetlands of significance that they are extra protected by the Corps of Engineers and the McHenry County Stormwater Agency. So again, you can see these wetland scars are showing up as wetland soils. We also look at historical records, and this is a atlas of the property back in 1914. And you can see that there's a channel cutting across here. That was part of the original hydrology, and it's been significantly changed. 1923, you get a different view. It's sort of that same drainage going across there, but there's also this line here is Spring Creek Road, and this is water going to Spring Creek. So these maps are kind of informative to us. And then this is a 1939 aerial photo that the NRCS flew, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And you can see here that I ask you to pay attention to this portion of the stream as we move forward in time to look at the dates of, the condition of the stream. And you can also pick out that drainage way that was on that 1923 up here coming across. There's another drainage way coming here. And then I also want you to pay attention to this little figure right here. That's actually an open water wetland on this site. So that's information that we can get and say, this is what the site used to be like. You can see most of it's in agricultural production. There's a farm here that was part of the original farmstead, and there's a little bit of a farm up here on Spring Creek Road. 1957, you can see that area that I was telling you about has been straightened, channelized. The farm is still there. The farm is still here. The wetland has decreased in size a little bit down here. And so that's informative. And we get into 64, and you can see things have significantly changed. The neighbor moved in. All of this up here, this is not a very good photo, but it still provides information with us. A lot of agricultural disturbance on the site, changing the soil structure. A lot of things are telling us that, we kind of got a clean slate to do restoration here. And in 2005, you can see pretty much everything that's standing on the land today. This is where that wetland was. There's the main farm here. Here's a barn here. The farm office is here. There's a stable down here. There's a stable over on the west side. They put in a running track, a racetrack, and a pond. But you can still see this drainage coming across. And, excuse me. And we can still see these wetland soil and wetland pockets along the stream corridor. So it gives us a lot of hope that there's good restoration opportunities here. We also know in order for them to farm some of these wetlands, they had to do agricultural drain tiles. And these are pipes, generally like 12 inches long, that are laid in the ground, made of clay or concrete. The farmer goes out there and digs a line and places these pipes in the ground and buries it back up. And they're butted end to end, and so they're left open, and the water seeps down into the drain tile and gets carried away off the site. Now, these drain tiles down here in the southeast part don't stop at the boundary. They continue on and across here. And the same is true of some of these other wetlands. And so we did this drain tile investigation, and we are looking at these drain tiles, and we get a lot of information. The drain tile inspector goes out and does these slit trenches to identify where the drain tiles are. And so you can see a lot of places they put them, they didn't find anything, but in a lot of places they did find things. And so these drain tiles actually have a size, and then they have a lot of information about how they're functioning, what they're made of, how deep they are. And so this gives us an idea of, if we pull those drain tiles out, what might happen to the hydrology on the site. And so I also want to let you walk through the current conditions. And so this is a picture of Spring Creek sitting at, there's a bridge in the middle of the property. And you can, if you pay attention to the bottom of the picture, you can kind of see a rock bottom, which is pretty interesting for a stream in Illinois, Northeast Illinois. Most of our streams are silted very heavily. This one, fortunately, as I mentioned earlier, has Spring Creek sitting above it, the forest preserve, and that the forest preserve, that 4,000 acres that sits there on the watershed, actually acts as a filter for the water coming into this section of Hill and Dale. So we've got a rock substrate, pebbly substrate, which is really good for a lot of mussels and other fish species. This is sort of an aerial view of the site. We're at the north end, sitting sort of up where Spring Creek would be at the bottom of the picture. And then we're looking south, and all of this in the background is Spring Creek Forest Preserve. And this is the stream coming through here, running through the preserve. You can see, like right here in the center, there's a little wetland pocket that we're paying attention to. We have this track that's still here. We've taken down the rails, and we're going to be trying to decide what to do with this area as we move forward in restoration. So this is kind of a really nice aerial view of the site. You can pretty much up here where the farm office is, this structure here is the neighbor's house. It's got like an observatory on it. But if you sit here at the farm office, you can look all the way down this valley and see the whole property, which is really kind of an interesting thing because viewscapes are pretty rare in Northeast Illinois these days. And I think it's one of the things that we need to be thinking about protecting. So this is another photo. Here's that bridge I told you we're standing at. Here's those slit trenches that they're looking for the drain tiles. Here's one of those little wetland pockets that are sitting there. And, you know, these things we think are actually sitting in the seep zone where water's coming to the surface. And so we're going to be looking at how we can restore those and enhance those. Again, here's that stream again, just showing you, and the wetland is right here. You know, the reason we believe that the water is coming down this hill and coming to the surface here, because the stream is really down almost 2 feet below this wetland. So this kind of pictures also gives us some information about what's going on with the hydrology. So we also want to think about the future conditions. And so, you know, we're really thinking about what we should restore. This is pickerel weed, Pontidaria, and this is a species that grows along open wetlands or marshes, and it's really an interesting species. It provides a lot of habitat for insects for pollination. And in the background, you may say, ooh, that looks really nasty, algae, but all of that is natural native plants growing in the water. The reason it's got algae growing on it because the water is really still. There's a lot of plants that are growing underneath the water, submerged. And we are looking at trying to not mimic this, but make this a little better. I think this picture was probably taken during a late summer, early fall time when water levels were down. So we certainly want to be able to maintain the shoreline of the stream, possibly with this technique. Pontidaria is the pickerel weed is a very good plant to have growing along the shoreline of a stream and stabilizing that bank so it doesn't keep eroding away. We also, as I said, we really want to be thinking about restoring the wetlands out there. And I think there's going to be significant wetlands, as you can see from the hydric soils. And wetlands are very unique in that they have, you know, what you can see here is kind of zonation. You know, there's the brown plants in the middle. This is a water buttercup that's blooming out here, this white flower. The buttercup, it grows in the water. And then there's all sorts of different plants that we call emergents that are growing along the side, such as sweet flag, iris, rushes, sedges, things like that, that we want to have out there. We want to get as much diversity as we can and get the landscape covered with plants. And, you know, a lot of people think about savannas and having trees and then having plants underneath it, and the prairies have plants in it. And then you get to the water and everybody thinks, oh, it's just water. And there's no plant life there. But in a really high quality wetland, it's just as vegetated as any type of prairie, savanna, or standing wetland. So we really need to think about that. Some of our high quality glacial lakes in the region have excellent vegetation growing all along the bottom of the lake. So we're thinking about how can we do that and get these things stabilized so that they don't get encroached by invasive species, which means we have to go out there and treat them. There's things like cattails, giant reed canary grass. There's a lot of things that can invade these wetlands, and we want to get as many native plants out there as we can so it looks like this, so that we have a very biodiverse, all these different plants provide a relationship with some kind of animal, and that animal probably has a relationship with another predator animal. So there's this relationship that we want to build, and build that big diversity that drives these systems. And so we also have that one hillside on the east that we want to restore to savanna. A savanna is an open area with primarily oak and hickories. And so you can see this site. A lot of what you see is shooting star and golden Alexander growing in the foreground here. We certainly want to reintroduce oaks to Hill and Dale as much as we can. It's an important species. It's one of the few keystone species in the Chicago region. Oaks are great for insects. There's over 500 insects that live and depend on oak trees. And if you have insects on trees, then you're going to have birds on trees. And so there's a whole swath of birds that are here. And, we're looking at red-headed woodpeckers, we're looking at bluebirds, all sorts of species that will be using this site. But it's also, there's a lot of mammals that are out here. There's reptiles, there's amphibians. We want to create a biodiversity system that those things all have a chance to live here and make this a home. So here on the left-hand side is sort of a picture of what we would call a sedge meadow. You can see the fine-leaved grass, and in the upper part of the picture, it's a little darker. So we're probably looking at Carex lacustris, which is lake sedge in the middle there. And then we're probably looking at Carex stricta, which is tussock sedge, the lighter green, the lime green. There also could be blue joint grass out here. The purple flower is Joe Pyeweed, and the white one I'm going to say is another eupatorium. And I'm forgetting the common name right now, but it's another wetland plant. And then on the right-hand side is more of what we would think is a prairie system, blazing star, rattlesnake masters, sunflowers, and a lot of diversity. Like, you can't see the ground on either one of these pictures. And that's a great thing for most situations. But I also want to say, like, in the wetland areas, when it dries out, those will be barren areas most likely. And those would be good, especially if they happen in the fall and the spring, for migrating shorebirds, which a lot of people don't pay attention to, but they do migrate through here, and providing that kind of open habitat is really critical for them. So I also want to talk about volunteer opportunities. Citizens for Conservation is a volunteer organization. The board members are all volunteer. We have a couple of paid staff. I'm going to do a little plug right now. We are looking for a restoration program manager. Our last one moved on to another position. He's still in the area, and so we still are working with him. But we want to be able to get people out on the landscape and be in nature and be part of the system out there, because this is really important for Citizens for Conservation. I've been with the organization for like 4 years now, excuse me, but I've been aware of them ever since I started in Lake County, and they always have a great program that starts with the grade school, goes to the middle school. They have programs out here for high school students, an internship program for people in college. And so they're always engaging people. There's work days that they have. And like I said, there's a lot of work that's going to have to happen to create this scene that you're seeing in front of you. All these plants were seeded there. They collect seed, they treat invasives. They do a lot of monitoring, they do bird watching. And so these volunteer opportunities are going to be very numerous. And CFC has a very interesting way of working with volunteers. They try to take on, acre by acre and get something done and get it done correctly. And then they move on to the next acre. And they may do it by 5 acres or 10 acres. but they have this system where they progressively just move forward and making sure what they've left behind is in good shape. And so here they are, hard at work. The picture on the left, they're planting sedges. The ones that are in the pots there is probably Carex stricta, what we call tussock sedge. And this was a technique that Tom Vanderpool, who used to be with Citizens for Conservation, came up with, because tussock sedge, like the sedge plant, the growing part, likes to be just above the water, about 4 to 5 inches. And if you don't plant it that way, they have a harder time growing. And so this was an idea that he did to put them in these degradable pots and raise them up. And it actually worked very well. And then on the right side, they're planting Carex lacustris. And again, there's a mix of volunteers here, high school students, and we're all doing this opportunity of being out in nature and planting plants. And many people come back and see the rewards, the just rewards, the next year and the year after. And so it's very rewarding for these volunteers. One of the bigger things that we probably do with Citizens for Conservation is collect seed. And we do that in all different types of habitats. And you can see all the different bags of seed there. They all have a label on them. We clean them, then we turn around, and then we mix them together in specific mixes for different community types. There's the wet prairie, the mesic prairie, and the dry prairie. And that's just going across a cantina of what we call dryness to wetness, or wetness to dryness. And then we also have savanna species, prairie species. And then in the lower right-hand corner, you can see them taking their buckets and full of seed and going out and spreading the seed after a prescribed fire was applied to this land. And that little handful of seeds that you see on the left-hand side, that might be about $5 worth. And so you can imagine all these bags. There's a significant amount of seed that's collected by volunteers that saves the organization lots and lots of dollars and not having to buy seed. So we're, like I said, we're also very interested in wildlife opportunities. We want to create habitat for several different species. Spring Creek at Hill and Dale is really going to be an interesting aquatic resource for mussels. I think there's 8 different mussel species in the stream. We're going to be doing a mussel survey this year. It's also habitat for turtles. You create wetlands. It's kind of the field of dreams thing, where build it and they will come. And that's very interesting. The mussels, those either need to be there or they need to be reintroduced. But right now, we think we have a good population at Hill and Dale, and that may serve as a source to work on other portions of Spring Creek and or Flint Creek watershed. So, but we do want to create habitat for these species. And, we're probably not going to get open water, as you see here, as much at Hill and Dale than we do at Flint Creek. Flint Creek was intentionally created to have open water, and it served as a detention facility for stormwater for the neighborhood next to us. And so we also want to, provide habitat for insects. A lot of people don't understand, but insects are drastically declining in numbers. And we're very fortunate that the Fish and Wildlife Service and the people who are thinking listed both the monarch and this species, the rusty-patched bumblebee. And you can pretty much see where it gets its name by that brown rusty patch on the back. And we worked with the Lake County Forest Preserve District and the Preservation Foundation of Lake County Forest Preserve, and funded one of the best bee people in the region to come out and survey for the rusty patch bumblebee on several locations throughout McHenry, Lake, Cook County. And we found that Flint Creek savanna was one of the better habitats for it. And the main reason for that is that there is a lot of good vegetation there. And one of the best is what we call bee balm, or monarda. Rusty patch bumblebees really like this species. So we're trying to reintroduce this so that the habitat is there for the rusty patch bumblebee. If it works for the rusty patch bumblebee, it's going to be working for a lot of other species. And we are trying to monitor and track that. This is a wonderful photo by Steve Barton. I just love his up close photos. So appreciate his photos. We're also looking at birds, and these two are grassland birds. And when you saw the big long picture of Hillendale, there's going to be a lot of grassland wetlands there that are going to provide habitat for the bobolink and the Henslow sparrow. So these are birds that we want to, that are there now in the agricultural setting, but want to maintain as we move into a prairie situation. But we also want to be mindful of the sandhill cranes that are there and any other wetland birds that we can draw in along with the grassland birds. So I do want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that have been working on this. Certainly the volunteers of Citizens for Conservation, the board of Citizens for Conservation. We are extremely grateful to Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. If you're not familiar with them, they're an organization that's been around, and they've been funding acquisition of natural areas all across the state of Illinois. They are very generous. They're also working in underserved communities, providing clean energy. And so they're a very unique organization that we're very happy that we could partner with. I also want to say, in our capital fundraising effort for Hillendale, we had 237 private donors during our fundraising drive that donated money to this property. And again, Citizens for Conservation did an excellent job of raising money for this project. We didn't tap into our fund reserve. This is all money that's been either raised by the grant source or private foundation or private local donors.